Yes. Well, good evening. I'm very happy to welcome you to our meeting and talk with the South African artist Lyndi Sales that we're currently showing for the 5th time with a show entitled On Being. And very happy to include Ange Ramsay, a writer and a poet who's very familiar with Lyndi and her work, into this talk. I have had the great joy of collaborating with Lyndi since 2009. We initially met at the Holland Paper Biennale in 2008, where I was very fascinated with works that Lyndi was showing. And in 2009, we welcomed your show in Transit, which was a very strong show. For your biography, well, Lyndi was born in Johannesburg in 1973, and you have an international career and have done many important things, commissioned works, and you are in important collections all over the world. And you represented South Africa at the 54th Venice Biennale in 2011. And Ange, I know your biography a little less, but I do know that writing and being a poet is something rather recent for you. You were born in 1974 in Zimbabwe, and later moved to South Africa to study when you were about 20. You have studied strategy, worked with marketing for big international companies, and severe illness brought you to reconsidering the way you were living your life a few years ago, and writing has now become a very important part of your existence. Yeah. So very welcome, very happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah. It almost feels as if you're right next to us. Lyndi, I was wondering, would you tell us, it's always very interesting to hear, how do you become an artist? Is it something that you know since you're from being a little girl, or how did this become your life project?
I think as a child, Maria, I was always interested in doing creative things. I spent many hours in my bedroom drawing and painting and making dolls' clothes and dolls' houses. I think my parents knew that, you know, creativity was something that that they wanted to nurture in me. My dad always used to buy me weaving kits and paintbrushes. Whenever he used to travel, he used to come back with creative projects for me to do. But I think, you know, growing up in South Africa, I went to a convent, and there was a sort of annual art competition for each class, and I remember at the time wanting to win the prize. So even at a young age, I knew that it was something that I wanted to pursue, and possibly I knew that it was like one of my strong points, one of my strengths. So there was this competition, and I went to a convent. I remember I made a painting of a nun with a whole lot of little convent girls on a path under an autumn tree, and I won the prize. And I think it gave me confidence. And then I continued to do art at primary school. Unfortunately, the convent was a very science and academic centered school, so there was no art offered for high school. And eventually, for my final 2 years, I left the convent and went to the Johannesburg Art, Ballet, Drama and Music School, which is kind of similar to the Hollywood Fame type school. And that for me was, mind-blowing and a complete eye-opening experience to what was possible. We spent most of our days focusing on art subjects. I did printmaking as a major, And after that decided to go to university to study fine art at Michaelis. So I did my undergrad at Michaelis, and then what most South Africans were doing in the 90s was going to London to work. At that time, because we were part of the Commonwealth, we were allowed 2 years to work in London, which is what I did. And I actually went to London thinking that I would become a graphic designer. I didn't have any experience, but I had a portfolio that I developed of graphic design work. And of course, when I got there, I couldn't get a job. Nobody would hire me because I had no experience. And I guess it's just one of those situations where it was a blessing in disguise, because I had to take the first job that came my way, and that was working in an art gallery, which I absolutely hated. Dealing with other artists all day long and really just kind of being an assistant in an art gallery. And then one day I went to the Royal College graduate show, and while I was waiting in a queue on the steps, I met an old lady who told me a story about her son, who was a mural painter and needed an assistant. I think she was actually just trying to find a partner for her son, but I was very excited to have another job and leave the art gallery that I was working at. So I started working for this muralist. He turned out to be Lucian Freud's nephew, and was a very interesting man, and I actually loved working for him. He taught me a lot of what I know today about painting. And then when my 2 years, work visa was up, I had to come back to South Africa, and that's when I decided to do my master's. And I think by doing my master's, I was then more committed to entering into the art world. And at that stage, I still didn't know if I would be able to make a living as being an artist. Like, one never does. It always felt like a very risky path to take, but it was something that I felt very passionate about. And I was just very happy to be accepted into the master's program. And I spent 4 years doing my master's under Pippa Scottness was my supervisor, and then embarked on my art career afterwards, which was not always easy at times. I mean, as most artists know that are emerging, we often have to take other jobs that are not necessarily that fulfilling, but in order to leverage financially the career, and then hopefully the one outweighs the other, and exhibitions become regular events, and you start exhibiting all over the world. And I guess I'm just grateful that I am practicing full-time artist today. I mean, I love what I do. I love the fact that I'm able to come to my studio every day, and that each project is different and exciting, and I get to travel.
Very nice. Thank you so much for this introduction. And Ange, would you say a little bit about you and art?
Basically, as you said, I see my kind of foray into writing as my accidental truth. And it came from a life change that I had. And I just was forced to really access myself on a deep level, and who I was, and not living according to what society rules. And so I was in lockdown and I needed something to do, and I started writing, and I realized that it makes me feel alive. And and then I just thought, like, as an artist, if you could help people shift away from something that doesn't serve them to a place of accepting themselves, or to give them freedom. And that was kind of what catapulted me into writing more. And and my themes that I explore are loss, rebirth, and the infinite erotic intelligence. And I want to face these kind of outdated paradigms that we've been told, and just get people to help them understand themselves and their world through eroticism, and that it's actually just alchemy. It's our life force, and it's where we can rediscover ourselves through imagine and life's mysteries.
Well, thank you so much. And how did the two of you get to know each other?
Well, we were both part of a Kundalini yoga community, and
Yes.
In the same class, and that's how we met. I mean, we were sort of Kundalini classmates for a while before we spoke to each other, and then one day we were having chai together after yoga, and we just started chatting and realized that there was a lot of we had a lot of common interests in what we were reading and listening to, and so on. And so we started exchanging podcasts or books, and then music, and then Ange would read me some of her poetry, and then I was showing her some of my work, and there just seemed to be a lot in common. So that's how our friendship grew. And I think it was over a time during lockdown when we were all very isolated. So it was great to have Ange as a kind of soundboard. And what I really liked about her was that often she would say to me, when I'd go to her with something that I needed to speak about, she'd say to me, do you want me to advise you, or do you want me to just listen? And I really liked that fresh approach, because so often you tell a friend something and they want to rescue you, and she wasn't in that role at all. She was just really there to let me express, and as an ear for me to get rid of something that needed to come out.
Yeah, so you have you share a good free space. Yeah.
And I think also the fact that we single women at this age, and we're just learning more about connecting to the authenticity of who we are and exploring, ourselves. And I think there's such power in that, and that's brought us together as well.
Super. Well, thank you so much. Now I suggest we have some images from Lyndy's studio that we will share with our audience, and then we will move on talking about your artistic work. Yeah?
Okay.
Well, there was a very busy arm at the end of the small video.
I wish I could work that quickly in real life.
Yes, but now by seeing this, we got a feeling of how you work when you do the collage works, and also an idea of the inspiration. I'd like to launch like a theme for conversation is how you deal with your desire to see the unseen, and this connection between reality and creation. Would you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think part of this exhibition is inspired by artists like Kandinsky, and how he often spoke about accessing knowledge that is like a spiritual process where it is actually, an artist becomes a medium and a channel for something otherworldly. And I think in specifically in this exhibition, the On Being show, I definitely I'm interested in altered states and accessing this realm of the unseen. And as you know, I always make reference to Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception, where he speaks about this specific light that he sees around objects, specifically plants, when he's in an altered state after taking mescaline. And that was the first time that I'd read an account of an academic who was taking a substance for the sole purpose of seeing the world with new eyes. And I was fascinated by his book and his story. And so when I watched a documentary a few years ago on Ayahuasca, I was immediately drawn to this practice. And for those that don't know, Ayahuasca is it's a tea that is made of a vine and a leaf from plants in the Amazon in Brazil, and they are consumed under the watch of a shaman, and one goes into a journey of hallucinatory images. It takes you into an altered state. It definitely feels like a being, a spirit that you can access. It gives you messages, and that was something that I did about 3 years ago, which has definitely influenced the works that are a result in this exhibition. So I think, on seeing the unseen, I'm often drawn to experiences and not only ayahuasca, psilocybin, but even my meditation practice is a tool for me to go into a deeper realm and to access something otherworldly, something that is not part of my mundane, something that is an experience that I think allows me to see beyond the veil of reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then it's like you're speaking of enchanting every day and making maybe the world bigger, going beyond the mundane. I think it struck me when I looked at your recent collage works, there's like rays coming out of them, and I couldn't help but that's my references, thinking of Baroque art, for instance. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, that specific artwork, the Radiating Fulfillment, was inspired by the sculpture by Bernini, where it's of Teresa of Avila, and she's been stabbed in the heart with a spear, and I've done a lot of reading on her, from accounts where she would often go into altered states, and she was just filled with the divine. And I think, seeing that sculpture when I was in my teens, I was on a family trip to Europe, and I remember seeing that sculpture, and it really did leave a burning impression on me. And then she sort of popped up again, before I was making that work. And I mean, I often refer to objects that are radiating the the Big Bang, stars exploding, nebulas, crystal formations. So that sort of form of something radiating is something that is quite common in a lot of my works, but specifically radiating fulfillment was inspired by that sculpture.
Yeah, and I also have another question. We often notice, and it's the case in this exhibition, that you work with maps, and not only you are very inspired by structures that we find in nature, in microcosmos and macrocosmos, but you also seem to have a strong fascination for maps. Where does that come from, Lyndi?
I think I may have been a cartographer in a past life, because it is something that I remember as a school child doing a project where we had to make an ancient map, and the technique was to take paper and put lemon juice on it and then iron it so that you have all these like brown marks, and then I would burn the edges. So I think old paper ephemera, specifically maps, was something that I was always drawn to. I made a lot of maps during my master's body of work, which was very much about the early explorers and the maps that they used. So I mean, I do have this like history of using maps, and I think in this particular body of work, it's really about place and location. And cutting up the maps is a way of cutting up fragments and then putting them back together. And that is a theory that I often refer to, and specifically in this work, was that theory that mystics talk about, where as we incarnate, we scatter fragments of ourselves into specific places on the planet and into people. And then we spend the rest of our life being drawn to those places in order to gather our fragments back, or being drawn to those people that hold fragments of us in order to become whole again. So I think, the act of cutting up the maps and then putting them back together is very much part of that whole theory of sort of gathering aspects of myself and trying to put myself back together in order to feel whole.
Yeah. Wow, yeah. I know that meditation is very important for you, and that your work processes you often describe them as a form of meditation. Recently, you have developed a new type of drawing that you tend to do every day when you go to the studio. We have a small video on your Ming fragment or Ming shard drawings. We'll show the video now, and then you can maybe explain to us where this comes from. Yeah.
Do you want me to?
Je crois. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that we were not quick enough in putting on the video. This is a new series of works you have started. Can you tell us what we just saw?
Yes. So I have quite a I have a drawing practice where I often make drawings, but I don't always make them for exhibition or even for human consumption. I literally have drawers in my studio of drawings that I make. And so it really just started as that kind of process of I started drawing around crystals and specifically looking at the resonance and the energy vibration of a crystal. And about 3 years ago, when I was on holiday at a beautiful coastal town called Morgan's Bay, I was introduced to a place called Treasure Beach, which is a location. It's a site where a 16th century Portuguese ship ran aground, and on board was a whole bunch of 16th century Ming ceramics, which then have been washing up in tiny little pieces of shards of ceramic, wash up onto this particular beach, which is near a nature reserve. You have to cross over a river mouth. It's quite difficult to get to. It's quite a walk. But once you get there, you just kind of wade through the water as it breaks onto the coastline, and tiny little pieces. You'll notice tiny little pieces of the blue pottery show up, and it's just such an amazing place to realize that you're finding something that was shipwrecked 400 years ago, and you are probably the first human to actually touch that since the ship went down. It feels like an absolute treasure. So I was able to collect about 20 pieces while I was there over that holiday. And I've had them in my room for years now. And I recently decided to use that as the starting point for the meditation. I find that to do like one drawing meditation per day is just a great way to ground myself, to clear my head, to center me, and just to concentrate on one small piece of paper. And I think the Ming fragments are really just a moment to clear my head, but also to contemplate the history of the trade routes, and also these tides, thousands of tides, ocean tides that have washed over these tiny shards, is also something that feels quite beautiful and evocative of time and place and nature. And I think for me, they're also reminiscent of mapping, like they kind of remind me of my the way I'm drawn to cartography and the actual like drawing mark that you find on maps is something that I'm trying to almost replicate in these drawings as well. But I guess they are just moments of meditation for me to quieten before. I usually do them first thing in the morning or late at night. And I think it's just a nice process to sort of gather all these fragments together, and eventually I will run out of fragments and I'll have to go back to that beach and collect more. But I really do feel like that site is very energetically charged, it seems, and was, I found myself there in a time of my life when things were quite difficult and dark, and it felt like a walking meditation. Just being on that beach and gathering these shards felt like a welcome escape from reality at that time. Yeah.
But there's maybe also something very fascinating about connecting through centuries, something that was handmade, hand-painted with these beautiful blue colors. So you go into connection to somebody who lived 4 centuries ago.
Exactly. And sometimes I think maybe I was one of those artists that painted one of those ceramic items, or I was somebody on that ship that perished or survived, because there were survivors as well. So I definitely feel like I was drawn to that site to collect fragments in the literal and the physical and energetic sense all at once.
Oh, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, there's. I also think it's such a moving thing that you have this beauty that goes through centuries, even as little fragments, yeah, something very human. Yeah. I think this is the time where it would be so fine if Ange would read the beautiful poem that was inspired by Lyndi's work. Would you read that, Ange? Yeah?
Yes, I'd love to. Okay, so this is called Be Still Love, and I'm just going to dive right into it. Alternate realities creating mirrors into microscopic milia, portals descending into beings of light. As we search for interconnectedness, we encounter ourselves, mirroring our habitual disconnection to self, embracing the disparity of our dystopian reality. Then peace prevails. Rest here a while, where we can finally dance to the death of our own sonnet, a visual representation of a visceral illusion, cavities knocking at our own Darth Vaders of light invaders, teleported to extremes, a world beneath the sea, twinkling iterations, dancing like twilight dawns into shadows, connecting but never seen, vapor rising like a frisson in the foam, at once freeing and holding revelation. Then molten lightning extended into some portal of reality, portended into fragments of our frailties. Unilateral conventions sparking dystopian records of free-flowing dynasties, butting heads, but visiting peep shows into the eternity of our minds, like the depth of treasure troves, pearls and light seekers, to be held into eternity, then lights dimming, bowing to convention of otherworldly carnal pleasures of delight, symposiums of evolution, twinkling lights into beauty, like a runway of pleasure seekers, guiding you home to primal truth and belonging, sucked into the cavernous knowing of our existence, deers bouncing into the openness and surrender, seemingly begotten splendor, reveling into the utopian dysphoria of our dystopian desire. Why did we choose this begotten dance? Bestial incarnate, chaotic thoughts and dreams, too far to hold and too near to see. The warmth, the gaze construct in the fire, this fire of the forgotten beast. Exhale into the false longing of our time, the shrill cacophony of an echo in my mind. Choosing to remember as it bounds closer, like a bouncing joyful epiphany of oneness, joined to the carnal vortex of our being. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think, well, it's a very interesting way of connecting so many layers of our being and our emotions into time and something more archaic that's part of us. It's really a beautiful poem, and I think it expresses many of the things we can feel in Lyndi's work. I just want to say for the French-speaking people who may be listening to us that we are so lucky that Olivier Brossard translated your poem into French, and it can be found on our website. Yeah. And I think that it was it's dealing with with heritage as well, or the things that runs through us consciously and unconsciously. And I think this could also be a way of bringing the conversation onto what it's like being South African. You are two white women, but you are South African. Could we hear something more about this? And then we've spoken a little bit. We will also show some images from South Africa, but maybe let us start talking a little bit before.
I mean, I think, being born in South Africa, both my parents were born in South Africa. 3 of my grandparents were born in South Africa, and some of my great-grandparents were also born in South Africa. Ange and I definitely feel like we do have agency to own that we are African, even though we grew up as, white privileged South Africans during apartheid. But, I think, for myself, I do try to reflect on Africanness, but in a subtle way in my artworks. I mean, the Helderberg plane crash was a very historic South African event, which I felt I had agency to speak about because I had a personal relationship to it. My father being a passenger. But I do, for example, in the On Being exhibition, I refer to the Marikana Massacre, which was an incident that happened a few years ago where 36 miners were killed in a protest, and for that I refer to in the meteoric rainbow series of knobkerries. And for those that don't know, a knobkerrie is it's used during protest. But it's a stick with a rounded knob at the top, and it's in our coat of arms. It's an emblem of power, and it's actually originally a weapon which was used to throw at a buck, and that's what the rounded knob was meant to hit the buck on the head. But I think for this specific work, I wanted to refer to this catchphrase, that is associated with South Africa and the new South Africa as being like the rainbow nation, which I kind of think about like, rainbows are illusions, and they have like a shifting goal, which will never quite be materialized. That pot of gold doesn't actually exist, and so the whole sort of illusion behind this catchphrase, which is synonymous with South Africa as being something that doesn't really always it's something that what am I trying to say? It's basically an illusion that can probably never be realized. And what I'm doing is trying to shroud it in beauty by covering it with these colors, which reference, a human genome sequence. So I often look at scientific images as well that influence my work. And I came across these very beautiful, like chromosome sequences that are made up of different colors, and so I wanted to somehow link the two and wrap the sticks with embroidery thread. And then there are other, South African events that I refer to in my work. The SKA Karoo telescope series of satellites was important in that it's a visual, an eye out of Africa. That's what these telescope satellites are, an array that are collecting data and essentially are eyes out of Africa. And the Uhuru satellite was also something that I made reference to for my work that I created for the Venice Biennale, which was one of the first satellites launched off Africa. It was launched off Kenya, and that was in the 1970s. And it was a satellite that was instrumental in recording evidence for a black hole. So that in itself was was something that it was, rooting itself in Africanness, and what I wanted to show in my work. And then I think specifically for the recent works was the inclusion of the San shaman cave paintings, which in itself was looking at a culture that was accessing an alternative or an alternative state to channel, and that is something that I'm deeply interested in.
Yeah, we can show a few images. We have a few images of this. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, we just thought we wanted the audience to see the San drawings. Could you explain a little bit about this? Not everybody knows about it.
Well, I mean, I was looking at the specific images that the San create, after they access other layers of consciousness. And when I was a student, I was a student to Pippa Scottness, who was my supervisor during my master's, and she's written a number of books on the San. And one of my jobs for her was to outline all the paintings and draw them on computer and get them into a vector format so that she could use them in her books. And so I would spend hours sort of deep etching and cutting out these beautiful San paintings. So I think I was naturally drawn to them. Once I'd done this ayahuasca journey, I became interested in the San art again, and the way they access an altered consciousness, and so I've used the symbols in the embroidery works of some of the works for this latest exhibition.
Yeah, well, I know that you're also very inspired by nature, and recently you did a residency. We have a few images, and then we will continue the talk. Yeah. Yeah, well, it was for us. It was very nice to see where you had been working, but yeah.
I was lucky enough to go to Tilbach. All those images are from Tilbach, and I was able to stay in a beautiful old farm. And and do some hikes into the mountain. One particular hike was actually a night hike. So we had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and hike up a mountain in the dark under the stars. And then once we got to the very top, we waited for the sun to rise. And I must say, that's not something I've ever done before, but it was really magical to wake up, to walk to the top of the mountain and see the sunrise from the top. It was cold, but it was really beautiful. I mean, I do find that nature is where I find a lot of inspiration. For example, a lot of these works for the On Being show are inspired by the turkey tail mushroom, which I often see on my weekly walk that I do at Newlands Forest, which is right at the foot of Table Mountain near the University of Cape Town. And I'm fascinated by the way nature replicates itself. So how the mushrooms are formed and how they sort of grow from the inside out, as well as, the ferns and then how they spiral and that whole sort of Fibonacci sequence of how nature actually sort of replicates itself from small to large. And that's really in a similar way of how I work with these collages. I start with small little bits, and then it sort of grows organically, like I would imagine a plant would.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Well, there's so many things to say. I know there's another poem by Ange that we would very much like you to read, because it connects in a specific way to the Khoisan heritage, and then it also connects to the next topic we would like to discuss with you, which is on being a woman, on the feminine. So please, Ange, would you read the poem? It's only a fragment, but it's a very nice fragment.
Starboy and the Sand Tribe. I always felt like I was fucking the Khoisan tribe when I was on top, straddling him, and he was deep within, hunting and gathering every fold, crevice, and membrane. My all-time favorite pastime, and his, I imagine, was me swinging wildly from his bone-tipped arrow. It would render me in a state of grace, induced into a hypnotic trance, much like the great sacred tribal dance rituals favored by the men of the Khoisan. Mercifully, like an act of God, I rotated, widespread yoga-strengthened pelvis in a circular motion. I could hear the woman in the tribe clap, 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 as thighs danced against his, the woman singing rhythmically as I jostled and rotated, losing myself to the rhythm of the moment, thrusting faster, harder, their chants getting louder and louder. In a frenzied state, moving towards my peace. He calmly watching, immersing in the spectacle of me unraveling, his own private peep show into the windows of my world. We were all one, the Khoisan, Starboy, and I, deeply connected to the wild.
Thank you so much. It's both, well, it has many layers, of course, very erotic, but it's also, I think, a very clever way of describing how erotics connects onto other layers. And
I think that it touches on possibly on tantra, and that for me is also like a way to access an alternate realm for sure, you know. So that's, you know, I think that's what attracted me to you know, what Ange was writing about, and so I always encouraged her to write about the subject.
I think it's accessing our truth through our imagination, and the power in that. It's like the unseen wants to be seen, and delving into the mysteries of our primal urges, and that ultimately we are all connected. And I think it speaks to, as you were talking about, how I see myself in the context of being African. And I've always just seen myself as being connected to the land, you know, and so I think it's what I wanted to get out of that is that you're not your race, you're not your gender, you know, and don't define yourself by that. But if you can access yourself through the veils of the unseen, I think that's where life's mysteries are to be really enjoyed. And
very nice. And you have thought and written a lot about sensuous intelligence. So this is where we are. Would you want to say something more about that, Ange?
Yes, again, I think sensual intelligence is the way that we connect to our surrounds. So it's using our bodily wisdom to really how we interact with the world around us and the resonance around us. And it's, you know, we're so conditioned. So it's like the brain thinks one thing, and but the body wants another. And it's just marrying the two, you know, and I see sensual intelligence as also connecting us to nature, and how we get our power, we get our everything from nature. We are so supported by nature. And I mean, I think this speaks through our work, both of us, and that's what brings us together, is that there's a resonance there that we actually are accessing nature as our medicine and our muse, and it comes through in our work. And so I think there's something to be celebrated as well, and it comes from, you know, respecting nature and how it nourishes us and supports us, and the intelligence that we get from living according to nature's ecosystems and the wisdom that lies within that.
And for me, the psilocybin and the ayahuasca are really just ways to appreciate nature more, because they really just allow you to see nature in a whole new light. So much we take for granted, but when you've drunk ayahuasca and you're placed in nature, all of a sudden it becomes alive and it feels like it's speaking to you. And the same as with psilocybin, you know, everything feels more enhanced, and you're just in awe with cloud formations and how they sort of dissolve and form, and it really brings you back to the moment and the present and being, rather than how we live our life, which is mostly in the past and the future. I think, you know, nature is a way to bring us back to the now.
And I think essential intelligence comes from, it's again what Lyndi said about being present. I think if anything, COVID and what we've all lived through has really taught us is that you don't know what's going to happen in the future, you know. And I think if you can just treat each moment as kind of with reverence and sacred and as a gift, and that will lead to a more pleasurable kind of experience of your life.
I think during this COVID time, well, especially what we've noticed in Cape Town is that people are going less to malls and spending more time in nature. We had quite a hard lockdown where we weren't even allowed to leave our homes for a couple of weeks, and then slowly we were allowed to get out into nature. And the walks were just packed with people trying to get out back into nature. So it seems like there's been a whole revival of people appreciating nature, which has been an amazing.
And do you think this is well? I wanted to get you a little bit back to the topic of the female and women, because you mentioned the other day a book that I think is interesting. It's called After the Ecstasy Comes Laundry. And could you say a few words about your thoughts in that connection?
Well, I mean, I was reading this book, and it's all about going through these experiences of feeling like you want to isolate, of feeling as though you want to, having an awakening. That's really what the book is about. It's about having an awakening and being in this alternate state and opening yourself up to a whole lot of feelings that you would probably normally suppress if you weren't having an awakening experience. But eventually you have to come back to earth and you have to do your laundry, So a monk would go into a monastery for many, many years, and then eventually he would actually have to come back and see his family. And it's that whole sort of integration of what is life like coming back, because we can't all just be monks and live in caves for our whole life as much as we would want to. And that for me has been quite an interesting book, listening to all these case studies of how you then merge these two worlds, because that's kind of what it feels like when you enter into other realms, and then you kind of wonder like what is real and what is not. And it's all about bringing that mindfulness into the everyday, because that's where life is hard. It's dealing with the school run and 2 small children and taxes and emails and all of that. That's where you have to somehow bring what you've learned into the everyday, and that's really what the laundry is.
I think those tasks are really important to ground us in reality. We are, spiritual beings living in a physical world. So maybe you can make the laundry meditative. I don't know. Got secret powers.
Yeah, so this is maybe where we meet our last topic, which is on being contemporary. And we spoke earlier about some days ago about this COVID crisis, where Lyndi, you experienced being ill and what it did to you, and what art can maybe do in this situation. Do you have something to say about what it's like being in the world right now?
I think the whole exhibition was really about being in the moment and trying to be in the present rather than the past or the future. They say if you're living in the past, then you're depressed, and if you're living in the future, you suffer from anxiety. So it's all about finding a perfect balance of being in the now. And I think COVID has definitely been a time where people are forced to be in the moment, but not only that, to also confront mortality. I mean, and I got COVID. I had it last July. It was the 5th of July. I remember when I was positive, and I felt as though I wasn't afraid of death. I feel as though I've seen other realms, so why should I be afraid? But then all of a sudden, when you're confronted with possibly becoming very sick, I'm an asthmatic, so one didn't, wasn't really sure like how I would react to it. And it really, I think, the fear that the media has instilled in us around it definitely didn't make things any easier. So I think this has been a time of reflection on ourselves, but also I think having a meditation practice during that time was really, really beneficial and helpful. And I'd read the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, which I created a whole lot of ceramic maps, which will be exhibited in August, around the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And so I really did feel as though I was prepared for death until I found myself in the middle of the night, like, struggling to breathe and trying to talk myself through it. And I would try and realize that my body is just a vehicle, and I would tell my higher self or my spirit that I'm able to leave whenever I want to, and that this body is merely just a temporary vehicle for while I'm here. And that got me through it. I mean, it was a dark time, that's for sure. I was completely on my own for 2 weeks in my house all by myself. But I got through it, and I think I'm stronger as a result. So it's definitely been a time of people going within, showing empathy, being rather than doing, and a time for reassessing or rebooting, or assessing what is actually important.
What would you say, Ange?
Yes, I think basically, it's, if we had to look at what we're living through now, and it speaks back to when you go through something that is very challenging, and it actually is just there to strengthen you. And you don't know that you can get through it in that moment. But it's actually just a reflection of our humanity and how resilient we really are. And we forget that. And, we're here to evolve. We're on this planet to evolve as human beings. And I think life is cyclical. It's about expansion. It's about contraction. And I think, yes, the pandemic has been a metaphor for life, obviously in a very condensed version, and that we don't have control over things. And we humans, think that they are all omnipotent, and we're not. So I think that was the great leveler. And that family is important, relationships are important, and that life is transient, and we will all die. Like we're all on this this desperate grasp to like hang on to life when the truth is that we can't. Death is inevitable, and I think that is something that we try and avoid as much as possible. Just like desperate need to have a vaccination for everybody is, I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like it's unnatural or unrealistic. And I think, sorry, speaking back to being like as an artist and what contemporary means, I think it's great to be able to have a voice where you help people understand what they're going through. I think that's the power of art. It's storytelling and helping people understand their world, because often you can experience something and you don't actually know. So I think that's, something quite powerful.
Definitely, yeah. But I can say that in the gallery, we have been very grateful to show Lyndy's show now after our third lockdown in France. And we really felt that there was a kind of energies coming out of your works that people were very grateful to receive, and also the beauty. It's not just about aesthetics. It's something that goes much further, that people are drawn into, and it does make a difference, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Moreau's constellation paintings that he made, and he said that they were about joy and happiness and love and peace, but yet they were made after a very difficult time, and after a war, specifically after a war. They were made soon after that, and I think I'm definitely one of those artists that can take something dark or possibly that people don't want to look at, and then I shroud it in something beautiful. It's just the nature of who I am, is to mask something in beauty in the way that I would, look at the Helderberg plane crash, the Marikana incident, the massacre. A lot of my works, if you actually look at the rationale of them, lead to something that's probably a little bit more ominous, but it's always shrouded in something beautiful. And I think that's just, the nature of the person that I am. Eternal optimist.
Well, I think that might be a very nice conclusion for our talk. Is there anything you feel you really want to say before we end this talk that I enjoyed very much?
I don't. I think we pretty much said most of it.
Yeah. Just thank you, Maria.
Well, thank you so much. It's been very inspiring for us here in the gallery to prepare this with you and to do this talk. And I hope that it's been interesting for our audience. And I thank them for their attention. And I would like to say a huge thank you to both of you, and my gratitude for your artistic work. It just makes the world bigger. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening.
And I wanted to say thank you, Maria, for just giving us the opportunity to have this discussion and to allow the platform. And I also wanted to thank Ange for her beautiful poem, and for just being an amazing soundboard for me, and an inspirational wise friend, and at times a partner in crime.
The best important friend to have.
Well, to the partners in crime, then. Have a very nice evening in Cape Town. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Maria. Bye.
Thanks.